5 flaws in Boris Johnson's Partygate defence come home to roost. My name's Mike Cashman, and with the incredibly witty and musically talented Augusta Lees, we've written It's My Party and I'll Still Lie If I Want To. This is now a 2023 update with extra songs and sketches for the appearance before the Committee of Privileges and the Committee of Privileges report, and time to say goodbye to Boris Johnson, we hope. This now has links to more than 140 videos. But this video is about the 5 flaws in Boris Johnson's defence. I made an earlier video about those flaws, and I'm now talking about how they're coming home to roost. So the first of them that I cited was Johnson claimed that not being proved guilty proves that he's innocent, and cited, and supporters of his have used this recently, cited the fact that he had only one fixed penalty notice. This misses the point that there are 2 different things being investigated. So certainly not being proved guilty does not prove that you're innocent, but also there are different issues here. The fixed penalty notices were for personal transgression of the COVID rules. The Committee of Privileges was investigating whether Boris Johnson lied to Parliament about events, whether or not he was personally breaking the COVID rules at such events. There are things about which he clearly should have been aware. Now, the second part of the defence was everybody thought that what we were doing was okay. That's not a very good defence, and as I said at the time, in a way, that's the whole problem, that behind the door of 10 Downing Street, they felt they could do what they wanted and it was all okay. But the evidence from the Committee of Privileges tells us more about that. Johnson draws comfort partly from a meeting in the Cabinet Office where he asked, "What we're doing is all right, isn't it?" And many people shouted back, "Yes, of course it is." One of his parliamentary private secretaries was 90% sure that Simon Case, the Cabinet Secretary, was one of those. Simon Case was sure that he was not. But this is not legal advice. This is akin to Johnson saying in Cabinet, "We're going to build 40 new hospitals. How many new hospitals are we going to build?" And people shouting back to him, 40. He didn't say, "I have been repeatedly assured that we would build 40 new hospitals." I'll come to assurances in a moment, but as I say, there was a groupthink that he sought to rely on where perhaps senior civil servants took their cue from Johnson, junior civil servants took their cue from senior civil servants, and Boris Johnson took his cue from all of them. It's interesting that in the debate, Jacob Rees-Mogg said, "Oh yes, well there was a source for the line that the COVID rules and guidance were followed at all times. It was in the briefing pack which I and other members of the government received." Well, maybe it was, but what was the source of that? It's interesting that the Committee of Privileges found that one of the briefing packs for Prime Minister's Question Time, Cabinet Office, was unable to supply them. If the line was the COVID rules and guidance were followed at all times in 10 Downing Street, then that may have been in the briefing pack, but I think we know where that came from. Because if we come to the point of assurances, which was the third point, where Boris Johnson said, "I have been repeatedly assured that the COVID rules and guidance were followed at all times in 10 Downing Street," then repeatedly turned out to mean more than once from more than one person. The evidence that was solid on that as to where it had come from was from Jack Doyle and Lee Kane, in other words, current and previous Director of Communications. The line from them didn't include the suggestion that guidance had been followed at all times, and indeed Martin Reynolds, his private secretary, advised him not to use that line. And the assurance was for one particular event, but it was later used by Johnson as a standard line in answer to any questions about any events in Downing Street. The interesting question was raised by the Committee of Privileges, and Johnson didn't answer this, as to, given his interpretation now of the way that he excused events in Downing Street, Would he at the time have said publicly, these are the rules and guidance? However, if you want to boost staff morale, and if you want to have a leaving event, then you can interpret this guidance flexibly. That's what we're doing in Downing Street. As I say, he didn't answer the question, but I don't believe he would have said that. I don't believe it's credible to believe that he would have said that. And therefore, it's not credible to believe that what he knew was going on was within the COVID rules, was within the COVID guidance. The fourth point, it's a fairly obvious one, but part of his defence was social distancing rules applied elsewhere in the building, perspex screens in other rooms. There was no part of the COVID guidance that said it's okay to have an event to boost staff morale as long as you've got perspex screens in other rooms that are different from the room that you're actually meeting in. And the fifth point was contempt for the rules. And in fact, I went on to talk about contempt for the committee. And it's a fairly cheap shot, fairly easy shot to criticise health and safety rules. Anybody can do that, but they are there for a purpose. Anyway, Johnson's contempt for the committee was actually reasonably clear when he sat in and gave oral evidence to them. Effectively, he said, yes, I have respect for all of you and the work that you do, provided that you find me not guilty. If you come to a different conclusion, then I may have to revise that view, which is obviously not respect for the committee. So his defence falls to the ground fairly rapidly in ways that I predicted, and 354 MPs examined the question of, given that the committee had examined this fairly carefully, is it okay for a Prime Minister to lie to Parliament? 354 MPs decided that the answer was no, it's not okay. 7 MPs had a different view. My MP, like Rishi Sunak and Michael Gove, put that question into the too difficult box. Really? I would have thought the answer is fairly obvious. Let's help them out of Parliament with our votes at the next general election if they're not able to take a clear line on the inappropriateness, to say the least, of lying to Parliament. So, as I say, my name's Mike Cashman. The very talented and witty Augusta Lees and I have produced this new edition of the book It's My Party and I'll Lie If I Want To, with songs and sketches and links in there to more than 140 videos. Occasionally it might be me reciting a poem, but more often it's Augusta singing and playing. Please do subscribe to the channel, Britannia Waves the Rules, but buy the book, because there are 6,000 subscribers on this channel. If enough of you buy the book, the channel will continue, and it's a great gift for anybody who is following politics in the UK. Lots to enjoy there, lots to dip into. Do give me your views on what I've said in this video. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel and buy the book.